So what does it take for a tiny, totally overlooked state to become one of the most powerful and longest-lasting empires in all of history? Well, today, we're diving into the incredible story of the rise of the Ottoman Empire.
And really, this is the big question, isn't it? How on earth did a small group of warriors, literally on the edge of a fading world, manage to build an empire that would dominate for over 600 years? What was their secret sauce?
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at their super humble beginnings as just a small principality, or what's known as a beylik. Then, we'll get into the real keys to their explosive growth. After that, the main event, the epic siege for the ultimate prize, Constantinople. And finally, we'll see how that single victory helped create a brand new global hub for culture.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, with the guy who kicked it all off, Osman I. Now, to really get why he was so successful, you have to picture the world he was born into.
Just imagine this for a second. The whole region of Anatolia, which is basically modern-day Turkey, was this chaotic patchwork of small states. The old superpowers, the Byzantine Empire and the Seljuk Sultanate, were both fading fast. This created a massive power vacuum, and, whenever there's a vacuum, there's always an opportunity for someone new and really ambitious to step up.
And Osman, well, he was incredibly ambitious. He used this perfect mix of strategies to just run circles around his rivals. He'd make alliances when it helped him, and he'd go to war when he saw a clear advantage. He got the best fighters to join him by promising them a share of the spoils, and pretty soon, his reputation for winning became its own kind of weapon. I mean, who doesn't want to join the winning team, right?
But look, personal charisma and ambition can only get you so far. After Osman died, his son, Orhan, he took that winning formula and basically turned it into a factory. He wasn't just winning battles anymore. He was building this sophisticated machine, a military and financial system that would power the empire's growth for centuries to come.
And right at the heart of this imperial machine was a military force that was unlike anything else in the world at the time. The Janissaries. Now, this was not just an army. This was an elite corps of soldiers created by a system that was, frankly, both brilliant and totally brutal. As the Sultan's personal force, their loyalty was absolute and their discipline was just legendary.
So, you're probably wondering, how was a Janissary actually made? Well, the Ottomans would take young boys from Christian villages in their territories in the Balkans. These boys were then converted to Islam and put through years and years of intense training. With all their old family ties completely cut, their loyalty belonged only to the Sultan. And here's the crazy part. This brutal system actually offered a bizarre path to power. A captured peasant boy could literally rise up to become a Grand Vizier, one of the most powerful men in the entire empire.
And this just perfectly shows the Ottoman approach to pretty much everything. Pragmatism. They cared about what worked, not about some strict, rigid ideology. So if you were a ruler they conquered, hey, you had the option. Convert and join the Ottoman government. If you were a non-Muslim living in their lands, you could practice your faith freely. You just had to pay a special tax called the jizya. This practical approach just made their massive empire so much easier to govern and way more stable in the long run.
So by the late 1300s, the Ottomans had conquered most of Anatolia and a huge chunk of the Balkans. They were an absolute powerhouse. But there was one prize, the greatest city in the entire Christian world, that was still just out of their grasp, Constantinople.
But just before they could go for it, disaster struck. This Central Asian ruler, Timur, invaded from the east, crushed the Ottoman army, and actually captured the Sultan himself. What happened next was a brutal, decade-long civil war that almost tore the empire to pieces. Power was eventually put back together under Sultan Murad II, but even he couldn't take the city.
But his son was different. Sultan Mehmed II, who we now know as Mehmed the Conqueror, was obsessed. He was absolutely determined to grab the one prize that his father couldn't and, in his mind, complete the Ottoman destiny.
Mehmet brought this incredible level of innovation and just sheer audacity to the siege. He hired an engineer to build a monster cannon, the biggest the world had ever seen, to just pound the city's famous walls. He had miners digging tunnels trying to collapse the defenses from underneath, and in maybe the most genius move of all, when his navy was blocked by a giant chain across the harbor, he just had his ships dragged over a hill on greased logs to get around it. Unbelievable.
And in the spring of 1453, after a long, brutal siege, the walls were finally breached. Constantinople, the jewel of the Byzantine Empire for more than 1,000 years, had finally fallen.
But this wasn't just the end of a story. It was a brand new beginning. The conquest was a massive turning point, transforming the Ottoman state from just a military power into a global center for culture, art, and trade.
You see, when Mehmed took the city, it was kind of a shell of its former self, run down and half empty. But under Ottoman rule, it was completely reborn. Mehmed brought in people from all over the empire. He rebuilt it, and he turned Istanbul into the thriving, cosmopolitan heart of his new empire.
And just try to imagine the sounds of this new capital. If you were walking through the Grand Bazaar, you wouldn't just hear one language, you'd hear a whole symphony of them. Greek, Turkish, Armenian, Persian, Arabic, and languages from all across the Balkans. This was truly the place where East met West.
And you can see this cultural fusion perfectly in their art. I mean, take Iznik ceramics, for instance. The techniques were actually inspired by China's Ming Dynasty pottery, but they were totally reimagined with these unique Ottoman designs and Middle Eastern artistic styles. This is what the empire did best. It would take the world's greatest ideas, bring them together, and create something completely new and beautiful.
Because they controlled the world's richest trade routes, the Ottomans introduced all sorts of new things to Europe, and that includes one of our favorites, coffee. All this trade kicked off a golden age of wealth and stability, which then fueled the absolutely breathtaking art and architecture that still defines the skyline of Istanbul today.
And this empire they built, it was no flash in the pan. It lasted. For more than 600 years, the Ottoman Empire was a major power on the world stage.
Which, of course, brings us all the way back to our big question. When you look at their story, it seems like the answer is this rare mix of military innovation, political pragmatism, and a really unique talent for absorbing and integrating all kinds of different cultures. But it does make you wonder, doesn't it? Is that a formula for power that could ever really be repeated?